PhD candidate, PhD student in management at Panthéon-Assas University, who will talk about the digital sobriety or the step after sustainable development.
The concept of sobriety is the topic of my thesis. I'm studying it as the next logical step of sustainable development. Sobriety focuses not only on how to produce green products, but also mainly how to reduce our consumption because of limited earth resources. My fieldwork is Orange, that's a telecom company. So I am employee of this company for three years during the time of my thesis, and I'm doing so a participant observation. I'm doing my PhD within Panthéon-Assas University, and I'm graduated in philosophy, anthropology, and management. So the global context driving the interest in sobriety, that's the climate change, the greenhouse gas, the depletion of the earth resources. Is moderation of our consumption compatible with a market economy? Are companies able to think and to act towards sobriety? How to implement it? As a reminder, sustainable development focuses on supply, cleaner products, but production and consumption are still increasing. How we can define digital sobriety? According to my point of view, I will say that it is the term that highlights and denounces the modern man, never satisfied with digital consumption and inclined towards the compulsive acquisition of electronic toys. Behind this apparent progress lies the world of overexploitation of rare earth resources and electricity-intensive terminal that exacerbate our carbon footprint. Our economic mindset and beliefs are geared towards maximizing profit and rewarding shareholders. Are the industry stakeholders have the capacity to produce green offers in order to moderate user consumption and protect their survival? In other words, can we think of an unthinkable? So how sobriety enter in the telecom industry? These companies believes into the heuristicity of the progress. We have to admit that very often they're able to improve energy performance. And I will say that that is typically an engineer approach. They are more efficient by byte consumed, but overall consumption of data increased by 50% per year. 5G can save 30% less electricity consumed, but be careful, it works only if the mobile phone traffic increased by less than 30%. Here, economy and ecological interests seem linked. New 5 technology launched the debate between energy performance and consumer doping, I mean consumer stimulation. The 5G raise the question of the paradoxical effects of energy efficiency. I mean the rebound effect. It is the Jevon paradox. It means that, to sum up, a better productivity of the resources involves very often an increase of the consumption and resources because the price is decreasing. A better energy performance stimulates the demand. The goal is not only to get super engineers, but it is to take the control of the prices. If you have a look of the example of the air transport into the two charts on the right of the screen, you can see first the kerosene consumption in air transport. It has been divided by 5 since the 50s. So I will say that, of course, that's a very positive point. But on the other hand, chart 2, airworld passenger evolution since the 50s has been multiplied by 7. This is an example of the rebound effect and the limit of the progress. So, how to control, to reduce the effect of the rebound effect? I propose you one example, very concrete, to counteract the rebound effect. In Australia, the government has set the floor price for a plane ticket at 40 euros to stop price breakers and social dumping. We talk here about companies like Ryanair, EasyJet, and some other companies. The Australian government also wants to introduce a 30 euro fee for all air travel over a distance of less than 350 kilometers. The ecological transition. Have a look about the false good ideas. Example, electric car involves a wrong transition. It's a transition based on technology and resource consumption, when the transition should be based on sobriety. Is worth it to own a car? How to think a new city's urbanization based on the analysis of home and job travel? How the telework can help this transition? Another way to try to answer to the question of the ecological crisis. This is the topic of the circular economy. The circular economy much better with a low rate of economic growth, GDP. The combined effect of recycling and lowering growth at the rate of 1% per year is massive. If you have a look on this chart, you will see that the resource lasts 153 years if the recycling rate is 50%. But to remind, if GDP is not 1%, but 3%, with the same rate of recycling, I mean 50%, then the resources are depleted not of 153 years, but after 72 years. So you can see the correlation between the economic growth and the efficiency of the circular economy. There is a straight correlation. What about the GDP all over the world? An idea of the figure. We have said before that we have to manage in order to maintain the growth of GDP under the rate of 1.51%. Have a look on this figure. In 2019, the GDP in France, it is 1.5, in Germany, 0.6, in United Kingdom, 1.4. So we are not very far from the slide before. Have a look of another example, interesting, about the evolution of GDP, who is more or less, I will say, the cosmogony of our way of thinking in Western Occidental. if you have a look of Japan GDP, you will see that the GDP is under 1%. So what else outside GDP? We have already raised this question some minutes ago, and I propose you to have a look of some other index. First, index of the best health system. And if you have a look, you will see that Japan is in a good situation about this index, despite its GDP very low. We could consider not GDP, but the life expectancy index. Have a look. Japan is in a good situation about this index too. The happiness index. We can discuss about the item in this happiness index, but it's another way to think the problem, not the problem, to think the question of what is the happiness, why we are on the earth, and to try to deconstruct the cosmogony of the GDP. Is the market economy compatible with ecology? There is two concomitant phenomena: the liberal economy, maximizing profit, retribution of shareholders, adjusting prices by the market. And I will say the homo consumer, the modern man is boring, he consumes, since the idea instilled by marketing that consuming is the way to happiness. How to react with an ecological crisis? I've started my thesis just 6 months ago. So, of course, I have absolutely no concrete result, but I have started to launch some survey. One of these survey is about peril and inertia face each other. And I will say that the temporal uncertainty of ecological crisis is a threat because the danger and the consequences are not clearly identified and scheduled. Indeed, there is a consensus about the ecological crisis, but there are several points of views from scientists about when and how will be our planet in the next year. And we could distinguish at minimum 3 kinds of behavior. First behavior, let's act now, it is still time. The realistic anxious. Behavior 2, I have time, technology can save us. This is the optimist procrastinators. Behavior 3, I don't mind, the selfish or the unconcerned. We could have a look about the theory of needs. What do we really need? How to distinguish? If we think the question of consumption and the question of how reduce the consumption, we have to think how to distinguish legitimate human needs from artificial needs. I mean, illegitimate need. But what is a legitimate need? How useful needs could be distinguished and categorized from futile needs? What are the socio-political, cultural mechanisms that will legitimize these priority needs? Nowadays, it could make sense maybe to say that in a pandemic situation, video for teenagers is a legitimate need because some teenagers are depressed to stay at home all day. The doubts about the notion of continuous progress. Progress is thought within an ideological framework of performance. A more efficient mobile phone is part of this heuristic and enviable idea of continuous progress without end. Moral or ethical point of view are set aside. Abderitism means the end of the myth of continuous progress. According to Immanuel Kant, the history of the human race appears to be in constant oscillation between progress and regression on the level of its moral value, without the balance even tilting definitively in favor of one or the other. So, if I act that progress is not continuous, then I can contest its supremacy. What about the danger of technical utopia? Because the question of sobriety is related within the relation we have with the technical object. Sorry. Well, just 1 second. Because of its power, which has its source in scientific foundation, modern technology carries an utopia in each of its projects by the accelerated development of its effects, without us being able to appreciate the consequences of its implementation. This is the point of view of Hans Jonas. If you have a look of Martin Heidegger about the question of technical, he thinks that the almighty man provokes and arrests nature to the point of changing the vocation of nature, which is simply just to be. The difference between the windmill and the electric power plant, modern technology thinks of use before utility and builds its indispensable character that is imposed on humanity. For example, an internet outage can disrupt a city. He said that this is the dictatorship of use. This construction of the elasticity of health, Tim Jackson, who is a British economist, and he said about mainly the GDP, if economic growth doesn't improve the human destiny, then its impacts on the planet are not just unfortunate, but downright tragic. He raised the question of the Estelin paradox from the economist Richard Estelin in 1974, who underlined that beyond a certain threshold, further increases in income or gross domestic product per capita do not necessarily translate into an increase in the level of individual happiness people. The question of sobriety forces to rethinking truncasted visions of reality. According to the anthropologist Philippe Descola, the conception of the nature of the modern is the least shared thing of the world. It is a recent invention and specific to a part of the world well defined, which includes Europe and North America from the 17th to the 20th century. According to Philippe Descola, 4 major cosmologies or world conception: animist cosmology, totemist cosmology, analogous cosmology, and naturalistic cosmology. This is the Western civilization. In a world we use to think in order to dominate the nature and to take the control of the nature. Can we still say, and if so, in what sense, that the ecological crisis is a crisis of nature? How to think, how to take into account in our moral and political reflection these multiple conceptions of possible world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. We already have a question for you. So what I suggest, because we are a bit tight in time, so we will ask you this question, and if you have other questions, then we will tackle them during the workshop. So right now, the question are in French. So Laurent, I will say it to you in French. So,
yes.
Comment réconcilier progrès et rééducation de la consommation?
Comment concilier progrès et rééducation de la consommation?
C'était réduction.
Réduction, hein, je pense. Hein.
Oui, c'était réduction.
Oui. Eh bien, déjà, il faudrait peut-être définir ce qu'on entend par progrès. Autant il y a un consensus pour dire que, par exemple, le progrès médical qui augmente l'espérance de vie, c'est un progrès. Tout le monde partage cette idée assez commune. Par contre, sur un certain nombre d'autres avancées technologiques, les choses sont plus ambiguës. Est-ce que, par exemple, le fait d'avoir 2 ordinateurs, 3 ordinateurs, d'avoir plusieurs téléphones, est-ce que c'est forcément un progrès? Tout ça est discutable. Donc, c'est le terme même de progrès qu'il faut définir. Ce qu'on entend par progrès dans les civilisations occidentales n'est pas défini peut-être de la même façon dans d'autres communautés, dans des communautés peut-être plus rurales. Donc, je pense que c'est à mon avis, hein, c'est la question même de la définition du progrès qu'il faudrait définir. Et comme le soulève Philippe d'Escola, c'est une notion qui a grandement évolué depuis le siècle des Lumières. Et je faisais référence tout à l'heure au fameux texte de la sagesse de Candiaranc. Quand les premiers colons ont envahi l'Amérique, ils ont été étonnés de voir des indigènes qui avaient un sens de la répartie extrêmement sophistiqué, un sens de la rhétorique également extrêmement développé, et qui déjà soulevaient que l'argent dans les sociétés donc blanches, eh bien, ça a développé des comportements extrêmement égoïstes, notamment. Voilà, je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu à cette question, mais j'ai tenté de vous donner quelques éléments sur ce que l'on entendait par progrès, qui est une définition complexe et très discutable.
Merci beaucoup en tout cas. Bon, pour les prochains échanges, on le fera pendant la table ronde. Comme ça,